Shalom. I'm Rabbi Arnold Rachlis. Welcome to Hayom. Hayom is the Hebrew word for today, and this is a show about contemporary issues facing the Jewish community. Today's show is on conversion and intermarriage, and this is a subject of discussion and debate that has continued throughout Jewish history. But it's especially become acute in recent years because the intermarriage rate is somewhere between 20 and 35% in the Jewish community, and because Rabbi Alexander Schindler, the president of the Reform Movement, the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, last year came out with a statement about reaching the unchurched, actively proselytizing, actively going out to bring in many in the American community who may find fulfillment in Judaism and who are not finding fulfillment in their present religious commitments. We have with us four very interesting and exciting guests, Leslie and Ed Simon. Leslie converted to Judaism 4 years ago, and she's now a student at Spertus College of Judaica. And we have Sally and Michael Wasserman. Sally was raised as a devout Catholic and converted just last October. And we're going to talk to all four of you. Let me begin with Leslie. Why and when did you convert, and what were the circumstances around the conversion?
I converted about 4 years ago, and at the time that I did it, we had been practicing for 6 years already, active members of a synagogue, and it just seemed that I was more Jewish than anything else at that time. We hadn't practiced Christianity at any time, really, except holidays originally when we were married.
You were raised as a Methodist. In fact, your father is a Methodist minister.
Right.
What kind of problems did that cause in your family?
In my family, it really didn't cause any. When we were originally married and I thought about converting because of the difficulties we were having finding a rabbi to marry us, he suggested at that time that I wait and give myself time to feel my way along and see how I felt about it, if I felt different, if this felt like something that I could make a part of me. And I did that. And really there were never any difficulties, though.
Well, Ed began by marrying you as a non-Jew. And then a few years later you converted, and now you're a student at Spertus College. Were the rules of the game changed?
For me, they were. Yeah. I have to go through a conversion now. I was, if there's such a term, a non-practicing Jew. I was raised conservative. I had a grandmother who was my matriarchal grandmother, who I wish would have told me, I wish I would have understood her. She was doing what the Bible said and teaching it on, passing the knowledge on to her children. And it was beautiful, but I didn't understand it at the time. And right after college, I kind of had no need for my Jewish religion. I had conflicts that I couldn't resolve, and rather than trying to understand the conflicts and to face them and to struggle through it, I just gave it up. And I was a minimal Jew, to say the least. And when I suggested, for some reason, that we raise our children Jewish, she agreed, as long as we do this together as a family. And that's when my conversion started to take place. I liked it. We've enjoyed it. It's been an interesting experience, to say the least.
And something unexpected.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Sally, you grew up as a Catholic. Did you go to parochial schools?
I went to private schools all my life.
And what happened within your family when you came back to your devout Catholic family and said you're ready to convert? How did they react?
Well, it was sort of a gradual process as things evolved with Michael. My family, of course, knew that I was very involved with him, and naturally knew that he was Jewish. And we had many long and lengthy conversations about it, and my mother, over time, has come to be very accepting of this. Most important, I think, she wants me to be very happy, and she knows that I am. Religion has always been very important in our family. It's very important to my mother. And the fact that I am active in a religion that I really care about and feel very committed to brings her happiness. It's not something that she feels connected to, but yet it gives her a great deal of pleasure to see me happy.
Was it easy to become an active Jew after being an active Catholic?
No, not at all. Not at all. However, Michael and I are very traditional and conservative in our practice of Judaism, and coming from a strict Catholic background, some of those transitions were easy. because it's ritualistic, it's traditional, it's involved in daily life. So some of those traditional values that I've always had, I was able to transfer into this situation.
Michael, you were raised as a conservative Jew.
More or less.
And now you belong to a conservative synagogue.
Right.
Why did you choose an Orthodox conversion, or why did the two of you choose an Orthodox conversion for Sally?
Well, probably a couple of reasons. Number one, in recent years I've become interested in Israel, and I've been to Israel a number of times. And I became aware of the fact that in Israel there's no such thing as conservative or Reform Judaism that's accepted by Israel. Is run in terms of religious matters by the Orthodox community. And I felt that in getting married, I wanted to be accepted in all levels. And so when we talked about any conversion, we talked about approaching it from the Orthodox point of view, which really isn't that much different than the conservative point of view, as a matter of fact.
What was the conversion process like? Sally, can you tell us about it? How long did you study?
Well,
what was the rabbi like? That kind of
it's kind of a long story in that my study of Judaism began when I met Michael. Michael is very active and he's very committed, and it's part of every day. So I began studying really when I met Michael, which was 2 years ago. And I began reading, became involved with Jewish friends, etc. So I was really practicing in my everyday life Judaism, so it wasn't such a big change. I then decided that I wanted to go begin formal classes. Michael and I weren't even engaged at the time. We had talked about the possibility of marriage. I knew that it was very important to Michael to have a Jewish home, to have Jewish children. And the more involved I became, the more important that became to me as well. So I began studying with a rabbi, and I met with him 18 times. And there were various books that were required reading, most of which I had already read. So it was more of a sharing of ideas and philosophies.
18 times over a course of 18 weeks?
It varied. It varied. But Michael and I went together. It was a real learning process for both of us.
Just a private course for the two of you?
It was private, just the two of us, so that we'd had the opportunity to discuss various attitudes, ideas, philosophies. We went through the entire life cycle, all the traditions and laws that every Jew needs to know.
And what happened after the period of study?
After the period of study, I prepared myself to go to the mikveh. I had a CRC conversion, so I went to the Chicago mikveh. And a very dear friend of mine came with me. And
you want to say what the mikveh is for those who
the mikveh is a ritual bath, and Orthodox Jewish women go every month to the mikveh as part of a purification process. And it is sort of part of ritual initiation into Judaism for a woman. It's a beautiful experience. I enjoyed it. I was frightened at first, but once I got there and realized how really important it was to me, it was a beautiful experience. And it was frightening and very strange. There were 3 rabbis there. I needed to immerse myself into the bath and I was asked several questions, sort of testimony of my belief, etc. And it was a very emotional time. I cried. Michael was upstairs. He couldn't, of course, come into the room, but the door was open a little bit, and he was there, and he was very, very moved, as well as my friend. So it was a beautiful, sort of terrifying, wonderful experience all at the same time.
Do you think that even more than the period of study, that's what made you feel like a Jew?
No, I can't say whatever really made me feel like a Jew, but that was a singular physical act that was overwhelmingly powerful to me, having that experience.
Do you ever sometimes not feel like a Jew?
Yes, there are times I don't feel Jewish. Most of the time it's with regard to ethnic things. I don't have, that's not my cultural heritage, so I don't have fond memories of holidays and matzo balls and traditions and things that my mother taught me and my grandmother did. So those are a lot of things that I miss in my everyday life. I have to identify for myself, and I've chosen certain role models, people I admire, friends that I've made, who have helped me develop the Jewish identity that I feel I have today.
Michael, have you helped her in that?
I try.
How? Let me ask you how.
Well, I think that I always felt that if Sally did convert, that I didn't want it to just be a token conversion, and that Judaism would be part of our home.
It couldn't have been with you.
And so we actually do try to be Jewish every day. We observe Shabbos to not 100%. We're not Shomer Shabbos, but every Friday night we have a little ceremony where we light candles and make kiddush, and being Jewish, we read Jewish books together. We study Hebrew together.
Part of everyday life. It's a very natural thing.
And then we were married in Israel, which certainly was a very moving experience for both of us.
Do you think, in looking back on the whole conversion process, that you changed after you went to the 18 lessons and you're with Sally at the time she immersed herself in the mikveh? How did you change in the course of those months?
Well, I'd have to say that it was certainly in part educational for me too, because unfortunately my Jewish education for the most part ended at my bar mitzvah. And subsequently, as Ed said, there was a big void in my life in terms of Jewish education, and to some degree in practice as well. So going through the educational experience was informative to me. Going to the mikveh with Sally was very moving. It was the kind of a thing that really seems to me, I'm very ancestrally oriented, and it really was moving to think that this was something that has gone on in our past for generations and generations, and I feel it also helped to commit both of us to pass this on to our children.
Another interesting thing about that is that it brought Michael and I much closer together. Through this whole process, our relationship deepened through the discussions with the rabbi about family life, about children, about just general life patterns. It brought up a lot of things for both of us, and we were able to process those things during that time. And it deepened our love for each other, and I gained more respect for Michael as time went on. It was something that enhanced our relationship. And even now, Judaism is something that brings us very close together.
It was a good way to begin your marriage in a way.
In a way, it was
a couple.
A really marvelous way for us to pull things together.
Yeah. Let me ask Leslie. Your conversion was somewhat different. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Study period, or any rituals, or anything like that you went through?
As I said, I'd been an active member already for 5 or 6 years. And we had attended adult education and services and holiday celebrations. So when I decided to convert, I didn't really go through a specific course. I did read a couple of books and had a discussion with the rabbi. And the ceremony itself I did not go to a mikvah. It was a short, maybe 20-minute ceremony that I had a couple of good friends present, and Ed was there. And of course I've been in school since then, so I've also learned a lot more from that. But as far as a specific conversion course, it was...
Would you have liked something a bit more formal? A course or a ritual like mikvah?
I'm not sure about a course, because at that time, I really did feel like I would have had as much information as I would have had in a conversion course. It wasn't satisfactory to me. I wanted more information, but I'm not sure that would have come through a conversion course. I think ritually I would have liked more. I get a little envious listening to Sally talk about the mikveh, because I do think it would be a very moving, special kind of an experience.
Did you ask, what kind of rabbi was it?
Reform.
Did you ask the rabbi if you could do it, or was it you really didn't know much about the mikveh at that time?
No, I didn't. And when I say that I had as much information as I would have had through a conversion course, I say that recognizing that I was a member of a Reform congregation, and I'm not sure that all that information would have been completely available. Not because anyone is withholding anything, but just because I think people express their own point of view. And this is the approach that is used in that congregation, and that was the information that was available to me. I believe I had heard the word. It's hard now to think back and remember exactly what I learned when. I believe I had heard the word. I'm not sure I knew exactly what it was.
Talking about words, do you ever hear the words shiksa, goyish? I mean, obviously you've heard those words, but do you hear them directed to you? Do you ever hear someone say, how could she be Jewish? In a sense, impugning your conversion, impugning your sense of being Jewish. These are sort of Yiddishisms that are thrown around. Sometimes they're thought to be cute. Very often they're very offensive. And they hurt. And I'm wondering if you've ever been hurt by use of term shiksa, term for non-Jewish woman, goyisha for Gentile-like things.
I've never heard it directed in a comment to me. I've heard the words in conversations where it would be used indirectly. That particular thing has really never bothered me. It just is language usage, and I don't take offense at that. I believe a lot of people do, and I can understand why, but it doesn't distress me.
Sally, you nodded that you would...
I have to say it does bother me.
Yeah. What context have you had
It's
these?
just a word, but it's an attitude, and I guess it's the attitude more than the word that bothers me. I was recently in Israel with Michael, and we were visiting a project renewal, and we were with children from Morocco, Iran, beautiful dark-skinned children, and children who don't look Jewish. And a woman who was standing next to me said, these kids don't look Jewish. And someone else looked, and she knew that I was a convert, and she said, isn't that what a Gentile would say? And I said, I don't know. And I said, besides, what does Jewish look like? Really, which is a very valid question. I mean, it's something that I think Jewish people have always found sort of offensive. And to sort of turn that around is rather painful for me.
Do you feel patronized as a convert?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. It's rough always having to sort of be questioned about things, having my motivation be questioned, being sort of I want to keep kosher. Michael and I are in process of koshering our home now. Gives sort of the super Jew, super convert, of course she has to try harder sort of attitude. And I kind of resent that because I make my choices, and I guess by example, and as people get to know me, they sort of trust that. But people are not so trusting of converts.
What do you do when you hear those when you hear those terms? When you hear someone say, "Boy, she looks like a shiksa," or "Boy, that's a goyisha thing to do." Do you ever say anything, or Michael, do you jump in gallantly?
Michael uses it himself. I have to say. Michael says to me, he says, Sally, it's so goyish. Please don't do that, Well, for 28 years, that's, the way I've been, and that's the way I was taught, and certain things are hard to change.
Well, I would say I take offense when someone says it in a demeaning way. If someone kiddingly says something about it, just like people make comments about our Jewishness, people who are born Jewish, Gentiles will sometimes tease us about certain Jewish traits that they consider. It depends on how things are said. Someone says something calling Sally a shiksa, I would get offended, especially if it would come from a nominal Jew who has no involvement in the Jewish community or his synagogue or anything, but just happens to enjoy eating bagels and lox, and that's his contribution to the Jewish people. Sally is much more Jewish than, in her feelings, than many other people. And we had another experience in Israel. Sally got on an elevator with a man, and he said to her, I think it was something like, are you Jewish? And she said, yes, I am. He says, you don't look Jewish. So she said, I may not have a Yiddish punim, but I have a Yiddish heart.
When you talk about traits, you're coming much closer to something that has disturbed me when I've experienced it, because where terminology and words don't bother me, a lot of times statements about attitudes or qualities or traits will disturb me. And I remember one time when I was at school and I had left my kids upstairs while I was in class, and I guess they were playing a game or something. And when I came upstairs, a woman said to me, you're Jewish, aren't you? And I said, yes. She said, your kids are so bright. Or I guess it was the other way around. She said, my kids were so bright, and then asked me if I was Jewish. And it's, I wasn't quite sure how to respond at that point. And I have had that. And the other thing, too, that you were mentioning, that it distresses me when people refer to me as a zealot or something like that. I know a lot of Jewish people who are very active and do a great deal.
And that's okay.
And it's fine.
It's considered to be a thing to be admired.
Well, let's talk about the myth of the, if it is a myth, of the super convert. I mean, that's what you're referring to, that the expectation is that this person does 110% to prove himself or herself. Is it a myth, or is it something you feel that unless you show that side, you'll never really be accepted?
I think that maybe it's not, I don't think it's completely a myth, but I'm not sure that that's the explanation. I think maybe it's more that you need to experience things to know what's meaningful to you and what's not meaningful to you. Sometimes Ed's parents have experienced something that he has rejected, and he doesn't feel any need to do it. But I've never been exposed to it. My parents didn't do it, and I haven't had a chance to try it, so I want to do it.
Ed, give us an example of that.
I have to make a comment about that, though. I'm outraged, or angered at least, to say the least. And Leslie and I have great debates about this, about her not being accepted by a great segment of the Jewish community. One, because her conversion was reformed. She's not accepted in Israel. Our children are not considered Jewish because they were born of a mother who was not Jewish at the time of their birth. And these things bother me greatly. I know this isn't the issue, but the fact that I'm aware of what she's doing and why she's doing it. What I see in Leslie is a perfect dovetailing of two great goals. She's always loved education, and she's always loved religion. She's come from a religious background. And through Judaism, she's being able to study Judaism, and she's back in school, and she's like, when she's out of school, she's like a fish out of water. She loves studying, she loves Judaism, she loves the history, and she's doing it all for the right reasons. She just enjoys it. She finds a great, great depth of beauty in the history and in the heritage, and she can sort of understand those people who don't accept her better than I can. She understands the historical significance of why they are opposed to her conversion or her manner of conversion and whatnot. And I haven't been able to find that.
When you see people who are just nominal Jews, Michael referred to people, people who are just nominal Jews, and they're, because they were born Jewish, they're totally accepted. And then when someone becomes a Jew by choice, someone converts to Judaism, no matter what they do, there are segments of the community that are withholding accepting them as Jewish.
I don't understand it. I mean, it makes no sense to me. I mean, my own family is like that. I mean, when I was married, I received my mother's blessing, which is sort of a Jewish mother's blessing. And someday, I hope you have children, they give you as much heartache as you've given me. And I know why she said it. It really wasn't done with malice, but I did something wrong. I broke a tradition. You're not supposed to do it. Whether she practiced Judaism or not, there was a tradition that was passed on. She had some sort of a heritage that she had to hold on to. And I guess a little bit of that was in me, and that's why suddenly, for some godforsaken reason, I wanted my children to be Jewish. I can't tell you why, but it was something of my background, my cultural. We have a conflict here. We have a cultural Judaism, and this is what the girls have lacked, and it's hard. I can understand that. I grew up with the family get-togethers, the closeness, the celebrations, the ritual. They've missed that. They can read all the books they want, but they'll never get that experience that I've had for more years than I care to admit to. But then there's another thing that they've surpassed me in. They've got education. They're understanding the history. They understand the Torah. They're delving into it, and they're beginning to realize why it's so important to pass on the tradition. And that's something that I lost.
What happens at Christian family celebrations? In other words, Christmas or Easter. You two have kids. You have one set of Christian grandparents. You don't. You're just recently married. You don't have kids, but you've already passed a Christmas and an Easter as a Jew. But probably you wanted to get together with your family at that time. What kind of tensions did all of you have with the Christian side of the family?
Well, even over the past 2 years that I've been involved with Michael, it's been an issue. Michael does not feel comfortable participating in these events, and I don't expect him to. So really a lot of it has to do with me. The rest of it is I have a magnificent family, and they have been very understanding. They have a lot of respect for Michael. They like him very much, and they would never want to intrude on that part of my life. So we meet sort of on neutral terms. We get together for holidays, but not on Christmas. We don't exchange Christmas presents. We get together for dinners and for occasions that don't center around a particular religious event.
Do your parents ever say to you, why are you converting? Why doesn't Michael convert?
No, they really didn't. They really didn't. My parents, my mother, actually my father is deceased, my mother has an understanding of what Judaism is about, and she's able to respect that.
Ed, Leslie?
We're fortunate. We have no problem whatsoever. I see it in my children. how they have just grown up accepting that they are Jewish and that they have friends who are not Jewish. They have grandmothers who are Jewish and grandmothers who are not Jewish. And sometimes they celebrate a holiday. They share in someone else's joy. But by the same token, I've heard my little 6-year-old talking to his little friend across the street, and I've heard him talking about, we celebrate Shabbat, and you don't do that. Come on over. And he's invited her, and she celebrated Shabbat. And I like that. It's good. He's proud of what he has. He knows it's different. By the same token, he can go and celebrate somebody else's. Really, it's not part of my culture. It's not part of my religious upbringing, but it's fun to be a part of this.
What kind of presents in December do your kids get from the Methodist side? Do they get Christmas presents?
They do. We, in our house, we celebrate only Judaism, and very actively. And I really don't feel that my kids are in any doubt about what they are or who they are, their identity. But they know, as Ed said, that my family is not Jewish, and it's really a very big occasion for my family when everybody comes together. And there are 4 kids of, my contemporaries, 4 children, and all of us had 2 children. And so, there's a lot of kids, and it would be very hard to keep them out of that. So we do come together and celebrate with the family, and it's fun. Everybody has a good time, and I don't think my children have any questions about the place of it.
What was the hardest thing to change or to feel comfortable with when you became Jewish?
Celebrating Christmas was the last difficult change to make. That was the last thing that went, because it just always was a very special holiday. And first year was difficult. I was very sad. But as Jewish rituals and holidays became more developed and more important in our home, I really have not experienced that ever since then. So I would say that was the last. I think the other thing is just working out between Ed and myself. I was interested in your comment earlier about that you both are traditional people. And I feel that more than religion has been our difficulty, that I like to bring things in on an everyday basis, and I do like to celebrate traditionally, and Ed tends not to always want to do that. So it's been working out the dynamics of that, right?
I'm holding her back. I'm not proud of it. It's something I have to struggle with myself, but like I said earlier, I think my conversion is yet to come or is in the process. But I guess there's a bit of assimilationist in me. I don't want to make waves. I've known what it is to grow up as a Jew. I've known what it is to taste anti-Semitism. And I found that sometimes it's best to do what you want, but do it privately. And don't shout out at the world. For me, I found that's the safest way to do it, maybe, not the bravest way to do it. Leslie's so proud and so happy with her Judaism. And, a sukkah booth in our house, are you kidding? But we had one, and it was fun. Once she introduces it, I love it. It's a great custom. I'm enjoying everything I've learned, and I'm following in her footsteps. I've suddenly realized, after 10 years now, that I'm best off leaving the religious education of the family in her hands. She does a better job of it than I do. I introduced her, and I suggested we do it at Jewish. She accepted the challenge, and she's taken over now, and I think I would do her an injustice if I held her back at this moment. So I'm kind of following her, and she's doing a great job. What's most important, if I could add one thing, is something Sally said before about not having it in her background, not having the cultural experience. I often question why I lost my attachment to Judaism, my pursuit and my practice of Judaism. What went wrong? And I think it's that after that great old lady passed away who taught me everything, she raised me as a Kohen. And I actually officiated a lot of services, and I had a fairly orthodox upbringing. And when she passed away, my mother stopped the ritual in the house. I'm not sure why. She she always went on the high holidays and everything else, and those are very important. She didn't light candles anymore, stopped keeping kosher. And when I saw that not happening in the house, I think this was a sense of starting of confusion in my mind. So what Leslie is doing in our house, I think, is about the most important thing we can do together as a family to maintain the Jewishness, to pass it on, to keep it going.
We brought up the idea before about family continuity, family tensions. Michael and Sally, what would you do if you were to have children and one of them would want to marry a non-Jew?
Well, probably it would depend. I obviously would be a real hypocrite if I said under no circumstances would I support your marrying a non-Jew. but I would probably be extremely upset if they were to want to marry a non-Jew without
Who wasn't like their mother.
Who wasn't like their mother, and who would perhaps want to have my child join their religious faith or have no religion in the home. I would feel very upset about that. Exactly what I would do, I would really hate to say, because I'm not sure myself at this point, but I do know that I would be very upset.
But you would be bothered somewhat even if the person was a Jew by choice?
No.
Well, I wouldn't be that bothered. How could I be bothered? But I guess it really would depend on the individual. If I felt that this other person was going to marry my child and was really rather insincere about becoming Jewish, but was willing to do it to placate me, I would be upset about that. But if I felt that the other person was sincere and really wanted to become involved in being Jewish after learning what being Jewish is all about, I would be very happy to accept that person.
Everyone has had bad experiences with converts. I have had bad experiences with converts.
What kinds of bad experiences?
People who I don't admire. People who did have a quote-unquote token conversion to placate an in-law or whatever, who just did it for that one moment. And it's hypocritical, and it doesn't mean anything, and I have no respect for that. But if my son or my daughter came to me with someone who I could see sincerity and someone I could trust and I would believe in their word, I would back them all the way, and I would give them the encouragement that sometimes I really wanted and I needed. I would make sure that they felt welcomed, and I would try and help them through those difficult times. I'm going to do everything I can for my children to give them a strong Jewish identity. They'll have a religious education, they'll have a very religious home. We're traditional, we participate actively in all the holidays, etc. So that'll speak for itself. I think they'll make their decision based on that.
All of you must know people who have married someone, Jews who married someone who wasn't Jewish, where the non-Jew didn't convert. Do you see differences in those marriages?
Sure.
Ed, what kind of differences do you see?
Interesting. I have a friend now, a very dear friend, who is Jewish, but also a non-practicing Jew. But he does not deny his Jewishness whatsoever, and he married a woman who practices Christianity, and not zealotly, but she's a very religious person who's turned to the church for a lot of support recently. They have one son who knows that he is half Jewish at least, and suddenly he's decided to become Jewish. I mean, he wants to do Jewish things. When they went to camp at 5th grade, he started asking his father things about kosher. You can't have butter with milk. And he said, why are you asking? He says, because at school they said we're going away and it's going to be over the Passover, and they want to know who was keeping the Passover. And I raised my hand, I'd like to. And he suddenly realized that there's something coming out of this boy, and he's looking for something, and he has an obligation, no matter what he believes, to go on and help this kid. Not make the decision for him, but he better start teaching him what it is to be Jewish. And we've invited him to services at the temple and things like that. But I see that this family is not together. They're not doing things as a unit. I mean, the greatest thing that Leslie and I had happen is when she said, let's do this as a family. And we formed our friends together. Everything we've had centers around our temple, so to speak. Friendships and our religious experiences, retreats. We study together. It's been a pleasant addition to our marital life.
Do you think it's difficult when parents say, well, I'm Jewish and my spouse isn't, but we're going to raise the children in two religious traditions and let the child choose, or we're going to raise the child in no religious tradition? It's something that rabbis hear all the time. I mean, rabbis hear people idealistically saying that, but the facts are it doesn't work.
Personally, I think that's impossible. I don't see how you can do that. I mean, just in terms of holidays, there's a cycle that you go through that has a certain feeling to it, and if you're interrupting it with a different cycle, you never experience what it's like to go through one of these.
How do you tell somebody who's a friend of yours, though, who might be working on that model of raising children, how do you tell them it's not going to work, or do you?
I would say just that, but on the other hand, I know at least one family, and I think more if I were to sit down and list them, in which the conversion has not occurred. But they have been very supportive of one tradition. Of course, the people that I know would be mostly supportive of Judaism. And their kids are in religious school, and they because they've supported them and because they've educated them in one tradition, even though for whatever reasons one partner has not been able to convert, I really feel that the kids have done fine. I think they have a strong sense of identity. They know what their situation is, and it's okay. I'm not sure that it's a disaster if one person doesn't convert, but to raise them in two traditions is...
Maybe we'll pursue that in a minute. We've had a very patient audience sitting out here, and I'm going to go out into the audience and ask them a couple questions, see if they have some questions for me. Okay, who's got a question?
Yes, I'd like to direct this question to Ed and Leslie. I'd like to ask them why they decided to convert after they got married, after a particular period of time, instead of before the marriage ceremony.
I just really felt that I needed... First of all, I did mention earlier that my father had said something about waiting, which was not the reason that I waited, but it did cause me to stop and think. And then the more I got into it, the more I felt I needed to know. And I find that that's true now still. But I wanted to know and have experienced things enough that I could feel something. You know, if you have grown up as a religious person and used one liturgy, then you may still have the same religious feelings, and to go in and use another liturgy that's completely foreign to you, it doesn't express your feelings. But to have used it for some time, then it begins to express your feelings, and I converted when I felt that that was the case.
Another question?
This is to Leslie. Did you ever feel that you wanted to go back for another conversion, more religious?
Mm-hmm.
Would you do it?
Yes, I will. Right now my children are 6 and 8, 2 boys, and if it really... I would have an Orthodox conversion if I were going to have another conversion, so that, as Michael mentioned, there would be no question about who's who or who's what. But I don't feel that I won't go in until they're ready to be converted at the same time, and I'm not sure that 6 and 8 is an appropriate age.
She'll have to fight me on that one.
Others? Okay.
My eldest son married a girl who converted to Judaism, and my middle son married a girl who did not. So I think I've kind of participated in that particular experience. But one of the things I'm surprised that perhaps your teachings didn't teach you is that it's a sin. The Talmud says that it's a sin to ever remind anyone of their former status. And when people in my family or people elsewhere say, well, your 2 daughters-in-law who are... And I say, no, no, no. One of them is a Jew, and completely a Jew from the moment that she converted. I mean, that's the thing to say. That's the thing to get back with. You know, you say it is a sin. The people who are saying it are absolutely...
Well, they're just simply probably not knowledgeable. Really, it's not knowing that perhaps is true. It's interesting. When we were in Israel, we spent most of our time with religious people, with people in the Orthodox community, because we had an Orthodox wedding. And it's interesting, I was welcomed and loved and respected because of my religious beliefs, not because my brother wasn't bar mitzvahed, of course not. You know what I'm saying? Not because I don't have those cultural things, but because I am a Jew. And they respect me.
Do you feel that to have a show on this topic where people come up and confess that they weren't always Jewish, is that uncomfortable too? Is that in line with not being permitted to remind one of their previous status? Is this flaunting that idea, flaunting in the face of tradition?
Well, I don't think so, because I think that there are sufficient people out there struggling with the fact that we do have so many marriages where people are coming into us and we don't know how to behave. And I also don't think we're sensitive enough, and I think this is something Rabbi Schindler said as well, that we're not sensitive enough to the feelings of the people who come to us. And if we treat them in a certain way, well, we'll never open our hearts or their minds to us. I mean, Leslie was part of the community, and I guess I'm curious whether the community changed towards you after your conversion in subtle or slight ways.
Did it?
Not my particular community, no. I was completely accepted before and completely accepted afterwards. So, no.
I think that's very lucky, because I think that there are other communities where we're not quite so charitable, and I think that Michael's comment about nominal Judaism, the fact that people who come up who really, they don't go to synagogue and they don't know what they're doing, and they have the nerve to make this judgment on someone who really knows a lot more and is practicing as a Jew. And I think we all sense the iniquity in that.
Well, what do all of you feel about the Schindler proposal, about Rabbi Schindler's proposal? There were a number of parts to it. One was to make Judaism available to non-Jews through, not like at the airport with pamphlets and little pushka boxes, but to let the community in general know that Judaism is open, an open religious option for people in the American religious community. And secondly, to specifically zero in on non-Jewish spouses of Jews and to create within synagogues a welcoming attitude for them, to make Jews question their own anti-Gentile mentality, which sometimes does occur in Jews, as we talked about before, and to help non-Jews realize that the community is open to their admission. How do you feel about that proposal?
Well, my first comment would be that before, I do somewhat support the Schindler proposition because Jews are dwindling, and it's important for us to go on and on and on. And in order to do that, we need to increase our numbers. We need to have more Jewish children who will grow up and carry on tradition. But I think we need to start with welcoming the convert within our midst at first, before we can welcome in people from outside of our group.
Sally, how might that be done?
A little more sensitivity. I loved all your comments, and I couldn't agree with you more. Just a little more sensitivity and welcoming and warmth, and not quite so much doubt and questioning, motivational all the time. Do
you think there's an ambivalence
kind of
on the
letting
part
it be?
Is there an ambivalence on the part of most Jews?
Tremendous.
They look at zero population growth. They look at a high rate of intermarriage, between 20 and 35%, perhaps
right.
even higher. At the same time, they're not willing to accept one option that might stem the dwindling size of the Jewish community, which would be to welcome in non-Jews, especially those who convert.
Haven't you got an additional problem that you haven't unified the different religious, Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox?
Complicated.
You can get the Reform to accept you, then the Conservative and Orthodox won't, accept you, and somehow they have to get their act together too. I think, the idea is sound, but what Rabbi Schindler said, I think, is available. Of course, Judaism is an option to anybody, I think, but I think where his opposition comes, is making it a little bit easier than what even the Talmud says it should be. I think you're supposed to refuse a Jew 3 times before you allow him to even begin a conversion process.
Refuse a non-Jew.
A non-Jew, right.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Sally, Leslie, as you were growing up as a non-Jew, I'm sure you had certain impressions of what a Jew and Judaism was all about. Now that you are Jewish and more familiar with the Jewish religion, are those earlier impressions correct?
It's a good question. I have always admired Jewish people and, in a sense, have envied Jewish people all my life. Fortunately, I'm very lucky. I never knew anti-Semitism until I became Jewish. Now I have some problems with it, but from time to time. But I always admired Jewish people. So sometimes it's disappointing to me when Jewish people don't live up to the great ideals that I've always held.
Is there an image problem with Judaism, as from a non-Jew point of view?
I don't know if I know what you mean.
Is Judaism, the way you experience it, is the story being told? Do non-Jews understand it the way you feel about Judaism?
Do non-Jews understand it the way I do?
Yeah. Well, in a sense, do non-Jews, does your family have an idea of what it is to be Jewish the way you have an idea of what it is to be Jewish? Is there a selling problem?
To some extent, and most of it comes from the experience you have with Jewish people. It can be positive, it can be negative, and that depends on the Jew, how he feels or she feels about themselves, about their identity. The people who really like me and welcome me like being Jewish, and they can understand that I'm not so crazy for wanting to be Jewish. The people who are not comfortable being Jews, they think, what is this girl's problem? Couldn't she have found some nice Irish boy to marry? So it's really a question of the Jew's identity.
Another question?
Yeah, real interesting that all four sets of parents seem to have no problems with the marriages. Is that true? Michael, did your parents or Ed, your parents have difficulties with you marrying non-Jews?
My mother did at one time. Once Leslie is, and for the wrong reasons, though. It was because of the image. It was what her friends would say type of an attitude, and that infuriated me. I guess I could have accepted her disappointment more if she was practicing more in the way I have come to know that a Jew should practice the religion. I'm learning through my wife. Now that Leslie suddenly has become, or is Jewish, and everything's okay. She's terribly proud. I have a beautiful relationship. She's accepted us, and she's terribly proud of Leslie, and just very proud of her achievements, and it's her daughter, she brags continually about my daughter does this and this and this, and it's very heartwarming. But I wish some of this understanding would have come a little earlier, because I think it would have helped Leslie a little bit. It would have helped us quite a bit, right?
Are there risks? And it's not easy to say this well, so I'll try to say it with tact. Are there risks to non-Jews entering the Jewish community too easily? Without adequate preparation? Are there risks for the person who enters and for the community at large, Jewish community at large?
I don't mean to dominate this, but I think the risk is also for the Jews. I think we have as much of an obligation vis-a-vis myself and my own experiences as the non-Jew coming to the religion. It's not easy. It requires, when I saw conflict, or I saw contradiction, I didn't have time to try and deal with it. And I think part of Judaism, or part of the study of Judaism, as I'm learning through my wife, is that the contradiction is nothing to push you away from Judaism, but it's the challenge to study it a little bit further and to try and understand it. And I think, you can't make it too easy. I find I have difficulty with it, frankly. I think our educational process is something that needs, that's the crux, is how do we come across. Like Sally said, I think our PR is not at its greatest.
Sally, how would you have improved your 18-session preparatory course? Would there have been ways to improve it?
No. With that, I was very satisfied. There is no way to introduce a new Jew, a Jew by choice, into the culture. That is where the issues are. I embrace the religion. I love the Jewish religion. I embrace the philosophies, the values, etc. The tough situations involve cultural things, social things, lack of acceptance. I have no problem with my relationship with God, but every now and then in the community, in the show, or in club meetings or whatever, I have issues then. So it's really not with the religious aspect at all. And there is no way to learn these things. I had to learn on my own how to develop my own lifestyle as a Jewish woman, which hasn't been so easy.
Thanks. Other questions?
For anybody on the panel, do you think that successful conversions could set a precedent among young people, especially college students, who would say, well, I'll date anybody who I want to, and if they're not Jewish, if they love me, they'll convert?
Oh, it's so naive.
It seems to me that's, I mean, by the time a person is dating, it's really too late to deal with this issue. I think if you're concerned about who your children are dating, it's not, the question is not, are we going to make conversion easier or conversion more difficult? Are we going to accept people or not accept people? It's that you're raising your children with an idea and an understanding of the importance of Judaism and of their role in maintaining Judaism in the Jewish community, and that these are important values and important traditions that you've given them and shared with them, and you'd like them to be able to share them with their family. I think if children have a clear understanding of that and a clear feeling about it, that their tendency would be to date people with whom they could share these things. If it so happened that they were to meet another person, then I would hope that we would be able to, if the decision is going to be made and it's clear that that's what's going to be done, then let's look at these families as another resource.
I really have to say something about that real quick. No one loves anyone that much. Being Jewish is very difficult and very complex, and it affects every aspect of your life. If you marry a person who cares about being Jewish, you don't love anybody that much to convert just for that person. And if you do, it's a mistake, because then the Judaism rocks with all the problems in the relationship. You have problems in one area of your marriage, it affects your Judaism? No. You have to want to be Jewish, and that if that goes along with that relationship, then you'll be successful, but not based on just, do you love me enough to convert for me? It doesn't work.
It's a good point to bring out that traditionally conversion was not permitted for the sake of marriage. And today, all groups, Reform, Reconstructionist, Conservative, Orthodox, accept marriage as a starting off point. It's not enough for a final reason for conversion, but they all accept it because that's the situation in which most people even begin to struggle with the issue of whether to convert to Judaism. Had you not met Michael, the chances that you would have converted would probably have been slight.
I would have had no introduction.
Yeah.
I think one of the things about talking about conversion, and really in terms of what will happen to our children, if I had told Sally I would like her to convert to marry me, and Sally and I went to conversion classes, and each time after the class she would say to me, well, how come we don't light Shabbos candles? Or why do we eat bacon? Or why do we eat this if Jewish people don't do that? Here you want me to convert, but you don't practice what you preach. And I think it's important that in a relationship, if a person is going to become Jewish, that the person, if they're dating someone, that person has a feeling towards Judaism, that you don't walk out and say, why do we eat this or that, or why don't we do this or that, that it is part of your life.
We were clear on this from the beginning.
And we were clear on this right from the beginning.
From the first time we
and
started
the other point that I would make in terms of one's children, if you send your children to a religious school and they come home and they say to their mother, why don't we light candles on Friday night, or why do we do this on Saturday, or why don't we go to, why do you eat on Yom Kippur? And the father says, well, look, don't tell me what to do. When you get old enough, you can do what you want. And then when he's 13 and he stops his Jewish education, his role model of his parents is one who don't practice anything. And then it becomes very easy to assimilate out into the non-Jewish community.
Let me ask you a question about the other side of the issue. How do you justify the idea that the two people who were born not Jewish came with a religious tradition, and when they were adults they made an adult decision to leave that tradition for Judaism? But how did the two men who were born Jewish feel about making or strongly suggesting to their spouses to give up their religious traditions when each of you gentlemen remained with your religious traditions?
Michael didn't. We began our discussions of this from the very first time we saw each other, and it continued. And I decided on my own to start seeing the rabbi because I knew that I could no longer go on the way we were. I would either need to embrace Judaism while I was embracing Michael or forget it. It just wasn't going to work. So I needed to get clear on that before we went any further. He never asked me to do it.
Well, no matter what I say, I am Jewish, and it is important to me, and it always has been important to me. And it was just something in my past that I wanted to keep alive, and it
How
never...
do you justify to yourself, though, asking Leslie to convert when...
Selfishness.
Selfishness. Okay. ... I mean, anything beyond that, or...
There could possibly, to be very, very honest, I knew that you always want to please parents. No matter how old you are, you always want to make daddy and mommy a little bit proud of you. When you're 5 years old, you do it, and when you're 50 years old, if you're fortunate to have your parents with you, still do it. And I think maybe there's an element of that it would have eased this marital problem that I created for my family if she would have converted. But I don't know how much. I've never really had a question. Never became a problem, because when we sat down to discuss it, I kind of rolled up my shirt sleeves and said, okay, let's get into this. This can be a tough one. And it wasn't. Her only criteria, her only stipulation was we do this as a family, and we bring it into our home. And
the reason I bring it up is because neither Leslie nor Sally fit into the category of unchurched. They both were brought up within religious traditions. And the whole issue of conversion is not one between a clear black and white issue. It's one where something really has to be given up, something new has to be embraced, and one person in each of these couples had to give up something that was very dear to them. Are there other ways in your marriages that is made up for? In other words, have each of the gentlemen given up something dear to them in exchange for the conversion that their wives have given to them?
I did. I gave up my freedom, so to speak, of not practicing. I suddenly had to become involved in
Because I was going to say the same thing,
Yeah,
but I figured I would.
It's happened easier. I find it a pleasant task to be involved and to be a little bit committed and to try and learn, to go to adult education. And I'm her sounding board, and she's so excited when she comes from in class that some of that excitement and enthusiasm rubs off, so I want to go and learn a little bit, and we study together, or she teaches me many times. And I'm finding, it was a great idea. It worked out super. I got to add one thing, because it's unfair if I don't. I think it was easier for me to suggest it to Leslie. It was easier for her to accept it, because she tells me that when she was a teenager, she'd considered converting to Judaism without any, and possibly the spark was there a long time ago.
Michael, is there something that you gave up?
I can't think of anything.
I can't honestly say that there was anything significant I gave up.
But you have to come up with something.
No.
Okay. Another question?
Sally and Michael, you're really newlyweds. I'd like to ask you something about friendships. Both of you had your own circles of friendships. Has this made any difference in your social life, or have your friends looked at you any differently, or going to parties, or being a part of the social life that both of you were a part of before?
There have been a lot of problems, yes. We have, and it's okay with me, we have gravitated toward Jewish friends, Jewish involvement, because that's where we're at right now, and that's what I really need to develop. And the problem has been sometimes not feeling so welcome. We didn't get invited to a bar mitzvah at one time because it was before my conversion. I wasn't Jewish, and the gal didn't want me included. She told Michael when he called her and asked if he could bring Sally. These people knew me. We'd been out socially, etc. She said no, that she just simply didn't want me there. There would be nice Jewish girls there for Michael to meet. And things like that were terribly painful. I have to say, I really felt bad. And there have been a number of occasions where I have felt unwelcome and unwanted.
I want to thank the audience, and I especially want to thank our four guests, Michael and Sally Wasserman, Ed and Leslie Simon, for being with us and just beginning to really open up this topic of conversion and intermarriage within the Jewish community. There's a Hasidic story, and I'll tell it very briefly. There's a Hasidic story where one person says to the other, "Do you love me?" And the second person says, "Of course I love you." And the first says, "Well, do you know my pain?" And the second one says, "No, I really don't." And the first one said, "If you don't know my pain, if you don't know what really hurts me, you really don't love me." Something to remember as we talk about this issue. People we're bringing into the community, people sometimes we're alienating from the community. Please join us again on Hayom.